Hello everyone, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to this channel so you don't miss any of the content. We got a lot of people subscribing and a lot of people are loving the content, so if you're not subscribed, I'd like to invite you to subscribe. Ring that bell, select all so you don't miss anything that's coming. And this is also our backup channel for AI investigations. In case something were to happen, you can still find us here. And we have a really crazy encounter for you today. Hi, I'm Linda. My mom and I bought an old home that was used in a mortician in the 40s and 50s. They did all the work in the basement. There was still some stuff left down there, and my younger brother Steve would play with it. I didn't like that stuff too much, and it freaked me out. I didn't even like the basement. Steve liked it because it had garage doors that opened with the light switch. He could walk right outside from the basement. I'm sure they were used for funerals to load coffins. Steve would beg Mom to let him make the basement his bedroom. Mom told him no a million times. He continued to beg, and Mom finally gave in and let him do it. As time passed, Steve became more and more entrenched in his basement and the bedroom. He decorated the walls with posters and filled the space with his favorite books and gadgets, but despite his efforts to make it feel cozy, the basement still had an eerie atmosphere. One night, Linda woke up to the sound of Steve screaming from downstairs. She rushed to his room, finding him sitting up in the bed, pale, shaken, and really soaked in sweat. What happened? Linda asked, concern etched on her face. Steve's voice trembled. I saw something standing at the foot of the bed. It was tall, in a suit, watching me. Mom's heart sank. Had Steve finally encountered something supernatural in the basement? He stayed in the basement a few more days and started sitting in the bed. He asked me to stay down there with him for one night. I hesitated, but after he begged and begged and begged to have his little party down there, I finally gave in, just like Mom did. Reluctantly agreed to spend the night in the basement with Steve. As we settled in, the creaky wooden beams and the dim lighting made me nervous. Steve seemed excited, almost as if he was having me wait for something to happen. As we laid down there, him in his bed and me on the floor in my sleeping bag, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Suddenly, Steve whispered, "Did you hear that?" I listened closely. I could hear like faint whispers seem to come out of the walls. They were indistinguishable words spoken in hushed tones. I started getting sick. My heart started to rush. I whispered back, "What is that?" Steve's eyes, they sparkled with a mix of fear and fascination. "I don't know, but I've heard it before," he said. We lay there, frozen, as the whispers grew louder. It sounded like a mournful chant echoing through the basement. Some of them even sounded like people crying, like they were sad. Suddenly the lights flickered and died. Darkness enveloped the room. "Steve, I want to go upstairs," I whispered urgently to him. But Steve grabbed my arm, holding me back. "Wait just a minute," he said. Mike, he was really starting to freak me out at this time. The whispers ceased. The darkness seemed to vibrate with anticipation. Then we heard a hum. It was all around the room. It sounded like a little bitty engine running, or something trying to turn on. The lights then flickered back to life. We stared at each other wide-eyed. What in the world was happening? We couldn't figure out what was going on in this basement. Then a man formed from the dark fog that was in the corner. He was wearing a suit, and he was whistling. He was moving his mouth like he was talking, but there was no words or sounds. It's like we weren't there, like he was working. We ran out of there and we told my mom what had happened, and she said that she would stay down there alone, just to make sure nothing was going on. I really don't think she believed us. Mom's decision shocked us. "I'll be fine," she said. Her voice was steady. "I need to understand what's happening down here." Steve and I exchanged worried glances. Had she forgotten the eerie whispers, the dark figure, and the unsettling atmosphere we'd told her about? Or did she just not believe us? That night, Mom moved into the basement determined to uncover its secrets. Steve and I huddled upstairs listening for any signs of disturbance. At first there was a silence, then a faint whistling drifted up from the basement. Mom's voice murmured in response, though we couldn't make out what she was saying or her words. The night wore on with the occasional creaks and muffled sounds. We couldn't sleep. Our imaginations were running wild. Was Mom okay? What was she hearing? Was something hurting her? But we dared not go down there and wake her up. The next morning, Mom emerged, pale but composed. "I think I understand," she said. Her eyes were kind of distant. "That man, he's a residential memory. An echo from the past," she said. "What do you mean?" Steve said. He was almost afraid. "The mortician who used to work here," Mom explained, "he's still here in a way, trapped between worlds." We listened, and entranced as Mother shared her experience, she communicated with the ghostly figure, learning about his life and work. But as I started to dive into this, I found out that things that are sketched in the past don't communicate back. That's what really had me worried. But as she spoke, I noticed something odd. Mom's eyes seemed different, a hint of sadness and a touch of anger. "Mom, are you okay?" I asked. Mom just smiled at me, but her eyes betrayed her. "I'm fine, Linda. Just fine." From that day on, Mom's behavior changed. She spent most of her time in the basement conversing with the ghostly mortician. Steve and I exchanged worried glances a lot. Had Mom's curiosity led her too far? One day I was coming in from school and Steve had stayed home sick. I heard him yelling for help when I arrived. I was panicked. I ran in the door and I ran to the basement. And that's when I seen something horrible, Mike. This is my mother, remember. My mom had my brother strapped on the embalming bed and was putting tools all around him. She was telling him, "Be quiet, it's all going to be dark soon. The darkness is good." Then she seen me and said, "Aw, there's my assistant." I didn't know what to do, so I screamed. "What in Jesus' name are you doing?" The lights flickered, and the dark cloud left my mom. I seen it come out of her, and it went into the drain in the middle of the floor. There was a drain in the middle of my brother's floor in the basement. And then all of a sudden, Mom's head twisted toward me. Her eyes widened, and her mouth sprung open as she screamed at the top of her lungs. "Run." We all ran. We moved out of that house, and we sold the home. Mom said that she started seeing dead people through the eyes of the mortician. Some were not dead when he embalmed them, but he didn't always care, and he would always make sure they died anyways. Mom said it's like she was in his body. I stood frozen in horror, my scream still echoing off the basement walls, and Steve's terrified eyes, well, the way he looked. And who wouldn't look that way? Mom, I remember her in that basement that day, though. Mom's expression transformed from a serene to a frantic, "Run, Linda, now," she shouted, releasing Steve from an embalming bed. That day we fled that basement, leaving Mom behind upstairs. Steve collapsed onto the couch, shaking uncontrollably, Mike. It was a terrible thing. "What happened?" I asked, trying to process the unthinkable. Steve's voice trembled. Mom started acting weird, talking about darkness and silence. She acted all crazy. She said I needed to be prepared. I hugged him tightly, trying to calm his shaking body. We packed that night, and we packed what we could, and we left that house immediately. We didn't even look back. Later, in a quiet motel room, Mom revealed the truth. Her eyes haunted. She spoke of the mortician's malevolent spirit. "He showed me things, terrible things," she said. She whispered it to us, like people were listening. She said the dead, the living, all subjected to his twisted rituals. Steve and I didn't know what to think. Mom had never acted this way before. So I asked her, "Why did you strap down Steve?" I demanded an answer. I said it sternly. Mom's face contorted to anguish. "I was possessed. I was consumed by his darkness. I saw through his eyes, felt his twisted desires." We moved to a new town, starting anew, but the memories lingered, a constant reminder of the evil that had taken hold of our mother. She was still not quite right. Years later, Steve would confide in me, "Linda, I still hear whispers in the dark. The Mortician's presence haunts me." And I'd hold him close, knowing that some wounds may never fully heal. Steve's words shook me to the core. "Linda, I need help. I can't shake this darkness," he would scream at me. I knew exactly what he meant. The memories of that basement, Mom's possession, and the Morticia's malevolent spirit still lingered. So I did the next thing I knew to do. I told him, "Let's go see the preacher." So we went and seen Preacher Brown. I suggested he's helped people with similar issues. Steve nodded, desperation in his eyes. Preacher Brown, a wise and compassionate man, listened instantly and intently as Steve shared his story. The preacher's expression turned gray. "Son, you're carrying a heavy burden," he said, "but we can help you. We can help you get rid of it." He led us to a small candlelit room, and he started to calm our nerves as he spoke of verses. "Steve, you got to confront this darkness head on," Preacher Brown explained. "We'll perform a cleansing ritual, cast the evil out that's haunting you." Steve sealed himself, determination etched on his face. The ritual began. With prayers and hymns filling the room, Preacher Brown anointed Steve's forehead with holy oil. As the ceremony reached its climax, Steve's body began to tremble. A low, guttural growl emancipated from his throat. Almost sounded like a gurgle. "Get it out," Preacher Brown commanded. "Get out." His voice firm, let go of the darkness. Steve's eyes rolled back and he screamed, releasing a torrent of pent-up emotions. The room shook as if the very foundations were being rattled. The candles flickered wildly. And then there was silence. Steve collapsed to the floor. He was exhausted, but he was peaceful. Preacher Brown smiled and his eyes warmed. "Son, you're free. The darkness has been cast out." But as we left the church, I noticed something in Steve's eyes. Once bright and full of life, now held an even brighter light inside of his eyes. I asked him if he was okay. He nodded, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'll never be the same, Linda, but I'm free. We now live happy and free in a new city. And we tell people, be careful where you live in the history. Be careful where you live, because you don't know what secrets you can find in these old houses that can haunt you forever." Years later, Steve became a renowned paranormal investigator, helping others trapped by malevolent spirits. His experiences in the basement fueled his determination to understand and combat darkness. Mom, fully recovered, dedicated her life to volunteering at local charities, spreading love and light. I, Linda, wrote our story, sharing it with other people in the world, hoping to help people rid themselves from darkness. Our once haunted home was demolished, its dark history buried. But our family story still lives on, inspiring others to face their fears and to seek help. And as for Preacher Brown, he continues to guide those that are seeking solace. His wisdom and compassion are a beacon of hope. I hope my story can help somebody. That's a very dark story, a very scary story. These kind of things really do weird me out. I'm not a fan of these, but a lot of people are, because these are scary to me. I'm sure Brooks will like it. But I'm glad that y'all were freed from this thing. I'm glad you don't live there anymore, and I'm glad that it was cast out. And thank you for listening, guys, to another crazy story on AI Seeking the Truth, where that's where all these stories go to. Please subscribe, select, and smash that like button, hit that bell, and select all, guys. And we'll see you on the next crazy, weird, and dark story. Thanks for listening.